morning and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline Hamden. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make Hamden tick. It's Mayor Thursday. Hamden Mayor Curt Leng is in the studio for his monthly checkup on what he and the town are up to. Welcome back to the studio, Mayor Leng. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. You as well.
And I want to thank Yale Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program, Bircham Moses PC, and Gateway Community College. So, you going to the park tomorrow?
Going to the park almost every weekend night on Friday in Hamden. Tomorrow we have Boogie Chillin' at Villano Park.
Oh, yeah?
It's going to be wonderful. Very
fun.
nice program, as long as the weather dries up a little bit.
I think it will.
And then over the summer we have great concert series and the fireworks coming up, free movie nights.
But there's a park you haven't been going to every week. But I have a feeling you might be going to tomorrow.
Tomorrow might be a very good day to do a little hiking.
At Sleeping Giant State Park. So May 2018, we had a tornado. Tornadoes tend to love Hamden. They stay away from New Haven, they stay away from North Haven, they stay away from Woodbridge, but they always hit Hamden and cause damage, crazy damage. And last year it actually touched in Sleeping Giant Park.
Yeah, hit down in Sleeping Giant Park, taking down 2,000 trees in the park alone. An additional 1,500 to 2,000 in the neighborhoods as well. So It's an amazing amount of damage in such a short period of time. The trail was closed for a little bit long. Trails were closed for a little longer than expected, but there was a lot of work to be done to make them safe. And
who did that work?
The volunteers did the bulk of the work.
It wasn't deep. State Department.
They certainly coordinated it, and they trained. And the big logging companies came in and did the clearing that was necessary. But the actual trail work itself, the vast majority of it was done by the Friends Sleeping Giant.
And what kind of trail work needed to be done?
Moving trees. They were trained to actually use some heavy power tools, hand tools, chainsaws that I probably would not be too safe with if just handed.
And what was the group? Was it a group called Park?
Friends Sleeping Giant.
Mm-hmm. And how many people did that?
Goodness, I don't know how many, but they have a lot of volunteers and are very active. And
that's great. So what does that tell you about the role of volunteerism in keeping a community like Hamden going?
I think it's essential. It's essential to have really a successful community. You have to have your government backbone and your structure. You have to have partners. I think that I've been finding more and more, especially in this era of shrinking resources, that trying to use partners, use nonprofits, volunteer groups, and civic associations is absolutely essential to having a successful group that can attack things. And something I found more probably positive and heartwarming than anything is that a lot of times all you have to do is just ask, and people are willing to help.
And who asked in this case?
This time it was volunteers. They offered. They were there from within days, and actually they were told no at first because it was too dangerous.
Who told them no?
The Sleeping Giant.
And what
itself,
changed?
Sleeping Giant actually spoke to them.
You know what I love about Sleeping Giants? When you look at it from a distance, it really does look like a Sleeping Giant.
Who said it's not?
Look, when you're up, when up on West Rock, I'm always amazed that thing really looks like
it's remarkable. It really is. Yeah.
And you think it really might be?
You never know. No, but
So
they were
at first
told no. Yeah, because it was too dangerous, and they didn't want to have people just go in and use power tools and someone get hurt. Yeah, that was the goal was obviously not have someone get hurt. But they actually conducted the trainings, and if people did their training and were licensed and ready, they allowed them to go in and do the
So people actually got licensed in like using power tools?
Certified, trained.
Wow.
It probably wasn't a license formally, but it was a training that was required.
That is so interesting. Well, that's exciting. So people, let's get a sip of your tea. So people be able to head back starting 8 a.m. Friday.
Yeah.
Right in time for the summer.
I was actually, people were asking me if I had a guess, and I was expecting it to be the 4th of July. We got a little bit early.
Yeah, that's awesome. So big thing is hiking at Sleeping Giant. People once in a while get lost there, and they have to be rescued.
Yes.
The hardier people than I. I once actually got lost at Sleeping Giant.
For how long?
Anytime, not for long, but like going past the castle, because the easy hike is one I usually take to the castle, which is neat.
Mm-hmm.
Once my wife and I went, and it started getting a little later. We were a little unsure where to go back. We were a little nervous, but then we found our way.
The amount of trails up there is pretty remarkable. Even before Memorial Day, which was the original goal date of getting the park open, most of the trails were done, but some of the I'll call them the more extreme trails weren't finished quite yet. And you can't open it and say these trails are okay, but these two aren't, because that's just going to ask for people to go on those trails. But yeah, I tend to go to the castle, and that's about
Yeah,
it.
me too. Gillette Castle? No, what's it called?
Gillette's up in
Somewhere else in the state.
yeah.
It's the castle.
I always call it Sleeping Giant Castle.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so people have cookouts there as well at the base.
Mhm.
What else do people do there? Can you camp there?
I don't think so. I've never seen that. The association and the state is actually doing a really interesting listening project. They put out a survey online, and they're doing a number of public meetings to see what people want at the base of the Giant.
Oh, really?
So a lot of trees are taken out, obviously, and when you go by now, it looks very different. And especially in the wintertime when the foliage was down, it was stark, and it was a stark difference. Now that there's rebirth, it looks better, but it's still empty. So they've asked people if they want to see, a larger pavilion, more parking, more areas for having a cookout, grilling, more if they want to just keep it natural. And then what was kind of interesting was the specifics of the trees itself. You want to see just natural trees and let it grow over time. You want to see larger trees that'll grow a little bit faster.
Mean having more planted?
Yes. And then
And I
you
assume
want
that
native
the
or
trees
not?
left. Oh, well, why would you want non-native?
Good question, but it was on the survey.
And where does one find this survey?
Deep. I don't have the link, but I can get it to you.
Oh,
I was
cool.
sent an email and asked for it. It was more information than I expected them to be asking, and they're gonna have some public hearings too for people to come out and contribute.
Oh, so when are those going to be? Do you know?
They haven't announced them yet.
Okay, so the future of the base is up for grabs. All right.
There's opportunity there.
Mm-hmm.
Right when it came down, as soon as it was cleaned up, you could see that you'll have an opportunity over time for it to grow, and when we'll be looking at it from somewhere else, we'll see what it looks like. But there's an opportunity right at the entrance to, I think, even have even a more welcoming and open area that people can probably enjoy with their families.
And I'll bet some people are going to have very, very strong opinions
I'll bet.
about what should happen in the natural habitat.
I will bet.
Okay. And we will take those opinions seriously here at Dateline Hamden, WNHH FM, your home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live streamed by New Haven Independent.org. It's so great to have the park back. So you just got through a pretty messy budget season. Politics came into play a lot. People argue about budgets a lot, especially when you have to raise taxes. And the debate wasn't whether to raise taxes, it was how much. You sort of thought there was a psychological threshold. Don't raise them to 50 mils because that's a big flashing sign telling people Hamden's done, get out of here, or just lose hope. There was a divide on the city council. They voted against your budget, but then you vetoed it and they failed to override it. Their argument was that even though they didn't like raising taxes, they felt that you had to not set up a mid-year shortfall. So they felt it wasn't accurate that Quinnipiac, to count on Quinnipiac University, for instance, giving $2.1 million and Yale giving money they haven't promised. So how does it look to you when this is all done, the smoke is cleared? Any lessons from this process? Any further thoughts?
I'm really happy the way that things worked out in the end. I'm not happy with the process.
Civics. It's like, watch how it works.
Yeah, we haven't done this in at least the last 3 decades. So it's been, this is not a common occurrence in town. But I put a budget forward, and I wanted to have a budget with no tax increase at all. But we needed to have some increase, some additional revenue.
Well, you guys are picking up from decades of problems with your pensions.
Very much so, and underfunding from the state. We were supposed to get $16 million extra a year for the last 15 years in education cost sharing. If we had half that money and put it into pension, we wouldn't have a pension problem, and our taxes would be lower. But that's then, and this is now. So I recommended a budget with $0.75 increase. Try to keep it under $1 million, incremental steps that while not loved, it's something that people can handle and people can swallow. The council went a little higher. It went up to almost 3 times that much by the end of the process, and I just didn't think that level of increase in 1 year was necessary to justify what was in the budget. Our budgets had the same funding for Board of Education, same for pension, same for debt service, same for medical. So when you're looking at the big items, if you were doing something that was accomplishing a lot in order to justify the taxes, then I think more of a discussion would be worthy. But without that, no. And the Quinnipiac revenue number is brought up a lot, and we're working with Quinnipiac, and Quinnipiac's contributions, have been lower than that to the town. They've been between $100,000 and $750,000 over the last 5-6 years. A couple years, zero, and the range in between. But my budget had $2.1 million as expected revenue. The council's budget had $1.35 million as expected revenue. They're both estimates, and we'll work from there to make sure we have a balanced budget at the end of the year. If we have to cut back on expenses a little bit to make up for that, that's what we'll do.
Speaking of Quinnipiac, so last week, I guess, or 2 weeks ago, last day of WQUN, their radio station, they had any word? Is that any chance it'll come back as something, or is it just a dead deal?
Not with Quinnipiac, unfortunately. They had a different plan, a different approach. It was disappointing. I vocalized it myself to Quinnipiac's leadership. Tried to show how much of an asset it was to the community. Our public safety folks, fire chief in particular, was really passionate about keeping that radio station and tried to explain what a value it was to especially older folks in the town that go to it for a lot of information. But it's being repurposed by the university, and that's their decision.
So what are they going to do with the signal?
I don't know. What I have heard in the days after the closing was that there was still a possibility of something new. So I don't have that answer, but there's definitely interest from different groups.
Any sense how many people listen?
Not a number, but I'm always surprised at the number of people that say they heard something on QUN, and it's not just the older folks.
Well, that's interesting because they couldn't commercially sell it. In the old days, people would love to get a signal. I think even DRC didn't want it. They were the ones that seemed most likely to extend their reach. NPR had enough other stations. So it couldn't work commercially. I guess it's got to go nonprofit for that guy. It's like local journalism. Like, I guess you got to make it in a nonprofit way. And it's hard. AM is so much more expensive than FM. Because I met with their broker because they're going to see, you guys want it. And it would be an extra $70,000 a year to run that station than to run our station.
I didn't realize it was that much of a difference.
Yeah, and it's such different technology and older technology. And you have to have all that, on the land and the big towers you got to maintain and everything. Yeah.
It's too bad because the Bass and Leng show in the morning would have been really nice.
It would have been a can't miss. But hopefully something will turn up.
I think it will.
Something will turn up there. And then also one leftover point from the budget. So in the budget, you had put in new positions for community walking beats. You felt that was a way to bring more community policing. People who opposed the budget on the council said we can't afford that, and community policing doesn't need to be walking beats. You can combine people who are driving around with walking in a less dense city. What's going to happen with that? Are you still going to be able to fill those positions, or are they going to have some vote to still take those positions out? Like, how much can they tinker with the budget after your version gets passed?
So the council and the mayor's office throughout the year, every year, they work on the budget. It's not a set in stone document when it's finished. It's a living document, and it evolves as time goes on. I have already begun discussions with council leadership, council president, council finance chairman, and my finance director about some initial changes that I'm going to recommend before the year even starts to solidify a couple of the accounts that we learned needed a little more funding past the point where I gave my recommendation. So as an example, our CMERS, the pension payments that go to the state of Connecticut that we've been on for the last 10 years, that needs some more money because they did a new actuarial study and they increased our rates. So part of the funding from the new police officers that were recommended and a couple of other accounts where we had some flexibility, I'm going to recommend that goes, and there's some consensus with leadership on making that recommendation and making the change before the year even starts, so that we're not having an argument about it down the road.
How much can you keep having those arguments? Like, for instance, are they going to take those positions away? Those walking cops, are they going to be able to fill them?
I prefer to say pleasant debates. The walking beats are really important. And what we can do is we can assign officers to walking beats, and I have every intention of having walking beats. They're very important, and having walking beats in at least one pilot area.
You could do that without the new positions.
Not as easily, especially not with, we have about 13 injuries and comp cases right now. There's a lot of things going on, so there's less bodies in the department. But there's two things that are going to happen. We're going to have 2 assigned walking officers, and starting July 1st, every officer on every shift is going to spend a period of their time documented doing something with individuals out of their car in a proactive basis. So it's starting to turn that page and evolving the department into department-wide and town-wide community policing. But you also need that targeted walking connection, because with 240 miles of road and almost 70,000 people, you're not going to be able to make those connections with occasional stops when we only have a certain number of cars on the road. So those deeper relationships that are really important have to happen with individuals that are going to be the same spots consistently, seeing people, talking to people, and building some relationship building, some trust.
So this is your response to Jennifer Pope just posted a question: why focus on new community police officers and not a focus on community policing department-wide in every police shift? And you're saying yes.
Correct. Both.
Okay. And then the second part will still be subject of wrangling with the. So I was just wondering how that
I'm
works.
going to recommend less. I think that we need to, look at the budget, and we need to pull back the reins on a couple of areas that I would have liked to seen some investment, to make sure we cover the expenses that came in higher, or conversely
So it's
to
going to be
cover.
negotiation.
Absolutely.
All right. And as you said, it's a living document. Fire department got some honor this week. I was just noticing, what was that all about?
That was something that, and I have to give, he won't take the personal credit for it. That's not his style. But former deputy chief and current chief Gary Merweed, when he became the deputy chief for our town, the number one project that he wanted to work on was our ISO rating. It's an insurance rating for fire departments.
Insurance.
And so we were a 4, and he wanted to get us up to a 3. And with the work that was done over time, and it involves training, it involves review of infrastructure, it involves review of your apparatus, your locations, your response times, and a host of other items. The report's really interesting. I think you'd like to take a look at it. We got up to a 2 rating. And a 2 rating is only shared by 5% of fire departments in the country. It's a huge, huge honor for the department. But most importantly, when it reflects on how it's going to affect the town, our business insurance rate in particular, it's not going to affect the homeowner so much because your insurance rates aren't going to go up or down that much from the ISO rating. But if you have a large business, let's say you're the Hamden Plaza, or you're a Whitney Center, or you're an apartment owner on Mix Avenue, the ISO ratings can have a very big impact on your insurance
Why
costs.
does it affect business and not homeowner?
The homeowners, it's a little bit too small. I'd like to see if it does, but I don't want to give a false promise.
Mm-hmm.
I know it will for commercial, and we're actually having our own insurers through CCM, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, do a gamed out estimate. Pretend there's a business of X number of square feet, X value, ISO rating of this versus this, and so we can actually see what that range of savings will be, because it's really an economic development tool. Now, we have a higher tax rate, but if this ISO rating saves X number of dollars in insurance, well, that's a nice deduct. It's a nice incentive.
All right. So good work to the fire chief there. And there's a community forum tonight, the first of 3, about how the police and the community interact with each other. Who's staging that at the Sleeping Glen Church? I'm sorry.
Spring Glen. Spring Glen Church has an event tonight that was organized, I believe, by Hamden Action Now and New Haven Black Lives Matter. And I don't know a full, complete details of it, but I did meet with Pastor Jack actually and Rabbi Everman yesterday, and we were chatting about it and some of the forums that'll be coming in the near future. So,
what are you hoping comes out of that?
Well, I think what I hope comes out of all these discussions is some productive dialogue. There's been really a lot of differing opinions on how things should be approached. I think there's a universal understanding that we can all do better, and we can all improve. There's a lot of discussion, a surprising amount of discussion about which trainings are the ones to go with. Some really passionate discussion about which trainings are the meaningful ones and which ones aren't. So I hope it's productive. I have a group that started, I think we talked about this a little bit last time, a transparency and public input committee for our new police chief. And we have 3
Right, you see throughout the
hearing dates
forums
coming.
about, which is very well intentioned. People have been upset about the police. They want changes. They want to weigh in. I come from a very what's the word for this? Not curmudgeonly, but a perspective on this that I've watched. I love democracy. I love input. I worry sometimes when appointments to top positions get so public that everyone's weighing in,
Mm-hmm.
which they need to weigh in. But with these, like, almost they interview the candidates. They go in the public a lot, and then when the person that the majority vote doesn't want gets picked, everyone feels burned, like with the school superintendent in New Haven, other places with the police chief. And sometimes I wonder whether, you elect the mayor every 2 years. Aren't you electing the mayor to make the best decision on lots of things, and then every 2 years weigh in? Because otherwise, like, doesn't a mayor, like I know in New Haven, and now I think she might regret it, the mayor felt that the person everybody wanted was someone who did very well in a popularity contest, speaking to the public like you're running for office, but that in private discussions and looking at what these people were like and had done, she concluded someone else would be much better at the job. And now she's, getting people weighing in that election. They weren't happy with the choice. So sometimes I wonder whether you maybe need to have the trust of people to make a decision. They could just tell you if you were right every 2 years. Do you think there's any disadvantage in having this be such a drawn out public process?
So the answer is yes and no. Like many things, there's a balance. I watched our former police chief Wydra actually go through a very public process. Years ago, he was going for a police chief position in the Cape. And this
nice place.
if he had gotten the job, quite a nice gig. Him and his family would have moved. But it was a public process so much that the actual final interviews were televised. And I can say, and it was a shared opinion amongst a lot of people that he was head and shoulders above the other candidates in every metric you could look at. He wasn't picked. Was that the best public process, even though it was the most transparent?
Somebody else was better? And maybe you could say communication skills are important, so the person who best convinces the public he or she is able to do the job well maybe should be picked that way. It kind of goes back to Ross Perot when he ran for president, and he said he wants people to have computers at home hooked up to vote on bills before Congress, so it's actually elected by everyone. A lot of people like myself, maybe makes us elitist snobs, we kind of feel like we have a representative democracy where we vote for people every 2 years to spend the time to bone up on so many issues that the rest of us can't every minute of our lives. So while it needs to be transparent, we have to know what they're voting on, how they made their decision, what the information is, that it actually could harm democracy to have every decision become a popularity contest or a spin contest.
I actually agree with you 100%. If you threw me in the state legislature tomorrow, I wouldn't be prepared to vote on probably 75% of the bills.
And yet, if you were hooked up at home to vote on every bill and it were up to you, you'd be more informed than 99.9% of the public. And yet you still feel like you would
at least 3/4 of the items I wouldn't be ready to vote on.
Yeah.
So what I did with this committee is they're going to do three things. They're going to take input up front on what people want to see in a future leader. Then they're going to take the job description and say, okay, have we missed anything in the job description, from training to experience with community policing to some other levels of experience or training or education? So recraft the job description if necessary, and I suspect we will adjust it somewhat, and then put it back out there to try and cast a larger pool of candidates to come in. Then their job is to have discussions with these candidates and pick 5, not ranked, and give me 5 people that raised above the threshold. These are the 5 recommendations,
so that's
and then
not
we're going to go.
Vote, but it's a committee.
No.
And are these 5 appearing before the public?
That's the committee's decision. And I very much left it up to them to discuss that, because there are pluses and minuses, like you said. And some of the committee members had differing opinions on that. So that's going to be something that's going to be, I think, playing out.
I mean, it's a little bit wonky process stuff you and I love, but it's still interesting. We'll probably still write about it.
I'm sure.
How's your quest going to get? Oh, and by the way, so what is this timetable now for picking a new chief?
So we talked about a goal of 90 days, but it's understandable if it goes above, it goes beyond that, because you're trying to get an input process and you have to do advertising. And I actually wanted recommendations for how we can get our advertising and that net out there to get the job description and get the want ad out to a lot more places, because I don't think we do a great job of making key positions in the town aware to people that might be interested in it. Just because someone's in Maine, they might want to move to Hamden and come see the Sleeping Giant and be our town planner or our finance director, and we need to get that word out to more people in more areas. So that's one of their charges as well.
So we probably won't see it before the end of the year.
I wouldn't go that far, but it'll be probably toward the fall.
Toward the fall, okay. And then how's your UI fight going? You've been wanting to buy the streetlights from United Illuminating. They've been saying no. We didn't get a state law passed, even though the rest of the state that has Eversource is their electric company. They have to sell streetlights to towns. What's the latest on that?
We started hanging gas lights. We're just going to light them. And then I have a meeting scheduled with Tom Kirglio, our UI contact, to the next Thursday, the Thursday after. To have our next discussion, and then we're going to go from there.
All right, let us know how that goes. You listen to Dateline Hamden with Mayor Curt Leng. So I was thinking about your UI issue as I've been reading this really interesting new book about fiber optic cable. Harvard law professor wrote a book, Susan Crawford, I think the name is, for Yale Press. And it makes this passionate case that whether it's Hamden or New Haven or any city in the country, your whole future prosperity is going to depend on whether and how we get fiber optic cable laid in that last mile to a person's home or business. So everyone's talking about 5G wireless networks going to bring fast internet. But it still gets slow if that last mile continues to be from your Comcast cable company or from Frontier because it's copper wires or whatever, and that slows it down. So right now, apparently, we have much slower, much like 10 times slower internet coverage than everybody who lives in South Korea has.
I didn't know that.
Everybody who lives in Singapore, everybody who lives in Sweden, because they all invested publicly in this last mile fiber optic, which can basically carry the whole internet in like one pipe and go so fast. And that because of a conspiracy with the big telecoms, they've held off in this country from allowing that to be built. They don't want to invest in that copper wire as long as they don't have to because they have monopolies. And then in places where they do get forced to, they then control it so that you have to go through them. They still charge much. So even though everyone in those other countries has 10 times faster internet, they pay half as much.
Wow.
So what happened is, so a few communities in America did get together and do their own fiber optic network, like Wilson, North Carolina. So right now, Wilson, North Carolina, I didn't know this, there's this huge business boom. Everyone's bringing jobs there while every other town around there is tanking because of the really cheap, ultra-fast internet from this fiber optic network. As soon as they did that, the telecoms got the North Carolina legislature to pass a law that no other community could do that.
I didn't know that.
So there's a fight in this country because to stop any kind, it was like back in the days of electricity. Her analogy is when electricity started, everyone thought, well, at most it'll just be for electric light bulbs, and only the rich had it. Then FDR started having these Tennessee Valley Authority, all these kind of like public authorities that out of the public good for nonprofit create electricity. Then all of a sudden people could have like washing machines and all this other industry in their town and appliances in their homes. And she thinks that same revolution is coming. And back then they called him a communist for trying to stop the big electric companies from not investing in it or from controlling it. So could Hamden do its own fiber optic network?
So the answer is yes. Not on our own. We don't have the money to go and start laying the wire ourselves. We have fiber between our buildings. Actually, we have a looped fiber cable
between your main old and new town hall.
Yeah, correct.
And what happens with that?
It duplicates and replicates the police department and the town hall's computer backup and information on a continuous loop. So if one goes down, the other's got it backed up, and vice versa.
And does it get you? Do you connect to the internet on it?
I don't think that our full internet connection's on there, but you're above my pay grade on the on the tech.
So I don't mean to act like I understand this stuff. It's really complicated.
But I've read a lot about how much of an incentive and what a draw it is. So our economic development director group, Dale, has been working on what are some possibilities for funding mechanisms and possible investments.
Like Wallingford today, right, has cheaper electricity and better service, and people actually will fix it if it's broken because they did public power.
Absolutely.
Is there not bonding available since that you can, like if you were able to charge people in Hamden half what they pay now for internet to get twice as fast through these hookups, you don't think there'd be bonding that you'd be able to pay back with future revenues?
I do, actually. I think you could do tax incentivized financing. You could do
tax increment financing?
Increment, thank you. You could do a public-private partnership if it made sense and the return on investment was a certain number of years. Company makes its money for the work that it does to actually install the fiber. And I think that's a discussion that we have to have and we have to look at if we want to try and be on the forefront of these things. And
I also wondered whether Hamden and New Haven get together, or if you could link up with your universities that have an incentive in it to like create some kind of pilot that you got funding for. Because that would help the universities when they have dense campuses with a lot of people, a lot of research.
And we have a lot of universities in a small condensed area, so that's a pretty good idea.
I also wondered if public housing, because you control the land, so you're not getting any pushback on laying. Because sometimes they try to stop them putting stuff on poles, the cable, or better yet, under the ground.
Seems like the state's all too willing to give away our pole rights to the wireless. So that's why I'm with you on the conspiracy theory aspect. Yes. I'd like to take a look at that.
It's actually one conspiracy is true. I generally think conspiracies tend to be what people come up with when they just can't understand why something doesn't go right. But I do think, I mean, it's pretty documented that throughout the country, telecoms have been lobbying government not to allow the competition and not to allow the investment that's from competitors. You know?
There was about a year ago, I think it was. I was one of the people that was pretty vocal about this with Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, and they helped us fight against it. There was a company, and I'm not remembering the name because it was a company that was hired, but it worked under one of the big wireless companies, and they were going to allow them to use any municipal use area to put up small receivers. So you'd have small, and when I say small, they're smaller than the large towers, but there were some pretty darn big poles that were going to be right in the middle of neighborhoods, and also additions to poles that were there without having to pay anything, even if it was put on public land.
Wow.
If on Hamden land, we can just put it there. And it was outrageous. And, first we didn't get the opportunity to have public input or to have input from the local government to say, we don't want this here, or we think this is fantastic.
So when you do want them, like if the government gets into this business, given that tornadoes seem to love Hamden, wouldn't it make sense to bury them?
It would make sense to take the power lines under too. I wish we put a lot more of the tree trimming money into putting the power lines, at least in certain areas, even, or to get it started in town centers. It certainly would make for more beautiful areas.
And then the way fate works is once you do that, the tornadoes will start going to North Haven. Here we are, but we're in Dateline Hamden today, which is what we're talking about. Role of social media. So one thing that's tricky is you and many others in public life have discovered that a great way to connect very directly to people, let them know what you're up to, and to try to get them involved is using social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it takes. And then people come on, and I've noticed on your page, Curt, that people whack at you. You say, "Bring it on, let's talk about it." And you can't control what people post all the time. And as Ms. Bonadies, Marjorie Bonadies, the Republican minority leader of the town council, found out she's running for a new seat, rather than an at-large seat in a district. And she's running, and people started posting some offensive comments. They said that Southern Hamden's a ghetto. I'm going to come armed. And then she screwed up. She pressed a like. She said that she meant to press a thumbs down for one of them and just thank you for participating. But the question got raised separate from her because she wasn't endorsing those comments. When you're inviting the public to like really get involved and say what you really think through social media, you're creating the channels. What responsibility do you have to police it? She says she doesn't want to be the speech police.
It's tough. We're in uncharted territory for this stuff. It's new. And even though Facebook isn't a brand new tool, I don't think it's been used quite as much. And one of the reasons I think it's being used more is because a lot of the traditional news outlets aren't there anymore.
And they never did what you guys do. I mean, you're out in the middle of a storm saying when you're there right then, when you're finding out where things can be closed, you let them know in a minute. Right. It's not that one replaces the other. Like I'm sure you're right then, QUN, especially older people, but not only older, sometimes they would get it from radio like in the old days. But yeah, it's just a new channel that's very efficient.
So in the back and forth in the discussion, I think that for the vast majority of times, it's a very wonderful and valuable tool, and there's very good interaction. There's a lot of good private interaction where people can send in a message and say, hey, I need some help with this, or you have an idea on this, or can you point me in the direction, or give input. And people say, hey, I like this, I didn't like this, and not all of them want to share it publicly. They'll do it, on a private line. But either public or private, it's really the digitalization of a town hall. And I like doing town halls. I like doing mayor's night out. I like going to civic association meetings. And I tell people if there's some angry folks, and throw me in, I'll go into the belly of the beast and let's have a discussion about it. That's very much what the digital version of it is. And if you're in this business and you're going to represent people, you have to represent a lot of different opinions and talk about a lot of different things. And I'm not going to shy away from the social media because there's some negative with it. I think that it produces a far more positive in this role. I can tell you this: someday in the future, when I'm working in the nonprofit world, trying to help people in a non-elected office, I don't think I'll be as tied into it because it is very intense. The amount of time that it takes. It's very effective.
You're right. Yeah,
but it's a lot of time.
So how I felt for Margie Bondies. I mean, what did you think when you saw this story? Besides,
I actually just read it last night.
Yeah,
it was probably about 11:30, and I saw it. And I know Marjorie. I don't think that Marjorie has that intention.
Right.
I think Marjorie's a good woman. She's a good person from our town. And I don't know the details of the situation. I'd be lying if I did.
Just someone posted, Southern Hamden's a ghetto.
Southern Hamden is it's ridiculous to call Southern Hamden a ghetto. Southern Hamden is actually we have one Hamden. I don't like Northern
What I mean
Hamden.
is, what do you
Southern
do? What do you
Hamden.
do when people post something like that? If they have 100 people posting on something you put on social media, and you're also running the town, what's your responsibility to run for office when people post those things?
So I'll take it even at one more level. I asked an attorney actually to take a look at, and not in the governmental side, just a friend of mine, to give me that answer. If people are swearing, if people are bullying someone else that's on there, not just someone criticizing a position I'm taking or
Right.
questioning something,
I'm talking
saying
about making
that
racist comments.
right. If someone makes a racist comment, someone's bullying, someone's swearing, what are the rules on a public page and a private page, and there are some differences of what you can do. So hopefully maybe next time that we're here, I can tell you a little bit more about what I learned.
Oh, and that's very interesting, the legal responsibility. What about the moral and ethical responsibility?
See, my feeling is that we do have a moral responsibility to police that as best that we can. But people's right to free speech is out there too, and that's what makes it challenging, because I've been told that on a town's website, for example, if we had a Hamden website that had a blog with feedback on it, and someone posted something that was pretty horrendous, there's not much that we can do to take it down. It would be illegal to remove it.
Well, they can't cry. They can't.
There are certain areas.
Can't cry fire in a crowd
but
theater.
it's a lot slimmer than I thought it was.
So the idea is maybe you don't want to have a blog up.
On the town's website, it becomes quite clear that's Town of Hamden, and if somebody wants to have an opinion that's very different from yours and mine, we had less control over it. Social media is a new world, and there are actually there are court cases. I understand there's a case that's going to go before the Supreme Court, something to do with the president's Twitter account.
Right.
I don't have the case, but that was one of the things.
They could ban people. And I've had an evolution on it, monitoring comments at a news website. So early on, I was exciting, all the vibrant discussion, but there was a lot of sewage in it. And then I didn't want to look like I was not putting opinions I didn't agree with under cover of not liking the language. But over time, I really came to embrace my inner Chinese government censor, because I felt like as long as you know in your heart, you're not trying to stop someone from disagreeing with you, it's really important for you to say, and you're right, a public realm is different, like in terms of government, but it's your living room. And I think, and like until now, this could change. Media organizations have been protected and allowed any kind of filth to go up there. And I think that was abdicating our responsibility to conduct a civil public conversation where people are not bullied out of a discussion because of the color of their skin, or they hate by a bunch of trolls and small groups of people who want to hurt people by talking about what they look like or who they are, as opposed to the issues. So I've actually come to a position of feeling comfortable with pretty heavy moderation.
No, I respect that. I respect that a lot. It's the by allowing people to be out there bullying, it is the antithesis of what you're trying to do, and that's to encourage constructive dialogue amongst people,
and
amongst
early on,
very
a lot of
different
African
opinions.
Americans told me, we're not going to participate because a few people go on there and just try to say you're bad because you're black.
That's awful.
No, he says, get rid of that. Dirt Hunter says, thank you for all your hard work, Mayor. Civility is out the window. When 90% of your posts are positive, why can't people just stop targeting you just because they can? Tough question from Dirt Hunter.
It's part of the ball game. I did have someone say to me,
I think it's Dr. T. Hunter is my guest.
Okay.
Hunter.
Okay. I had someone say,
thank you for your comments.
why are you so positive? And I actually think it's part of my job. You're supposed to talk about all the good things in your community, and I actually happen to believe them. So it makes it a little easier. I'm not going to go out there and ho hum, everything is terrible. It's not, and that doesn't mean that there's not issues to be dealt with and a lot of challenges, because there are, but there are in most places.
All right, and someone wrote in with something I never heard of, N40. There's a part of Hamden known as N40, and they wrote in there was a revaluation by an outside source a few years ago. The valuation put a different assessment rate on our area of Hamden, which is referred to as N40. Its taxes have increased a lot compared to the rest of Hamden. For example, our personal taxes increased 30% in 1 year to over $20,000. The same house down a few blocks down the road out of N40 pays only $6,000 to $7,000 because it's not in N40. We've been trying to rectify this with officials. It's unfair. We're being held for ransom. What can we do?
it's been a very difficult situation. N40 is neighborhood 40. The reval company, Vision Appraisal, that comes in, and Vision Appraisal is one of a few reval companies that do revaluation process in Connecticut. In Connecticut, you have to do it every 5 years. You can do it a little quicker and do it in 4, or you can ask for an extension and do it every 6. But 5 is the mandate. It used to be 10 years, and they
that causes
changed
such a
it.
problem every 10 years.
Yep.
Then you get
So in this particular reval, the last one, and we're at the 4-year mark, and we're actually about to take the swing and start early for this one. That's the recommendation of the assessor at this point. 2/3 of the town's people in that reval saw values go down, and even though there was a mill rate increase, their taxes actually stayed the same or about the same, $100 up or down, $100 up or a significant down. 2/3 of the entire town saw that, even with the mill increase. 1/3 of the town saw values that went up, and when those values went up, and neighborhood 40 was one of the ones that was valued higher.
Where is that?
Neighborhood 40 is in the Whitneyville area, and it crosses over Lake Whitney into the Hartford Turnpike and Ridge Road area between Ridge Road and Hartford Turnpike. It's an interesting and unusual neighborhood, I've said from the beginning, because usually a geographic boundary like a lake would split a neighborhood. You wouldn't call that a neighborhood because people aren't swimming across it to get to visit their neighbors. But Vision made that one of the neighborhoods. And our past assessor put a lot of time into looking at it because he thought that the numbers were a little bit high as well. But the samples that were there with sales, and they have an algorithm that they work through with Vision, and we can't control it. Because I've had some people say to me, well, you've intentionally put our taxes up so you can make them lower for everybody else. I couldn't do that if I tried to be illegal. We receive this information from the independent company. There's opportunities for the assessor to go back and forth and to question things and to clarify things. As a specific example, we had a situation where on one street, it was a Haverford Street, there was one person that came to the town clerk and said, my property taxes were increased over $2,000 this year. And so I spoke with our town clerk, Severe. I said, it's not possible. I said, I looked at the area. I said, I looked at Springland. The values stayed the same. I said, a couple people had a couple dollars lower, a couple dollars higher, but there's no way there was that kind of spike. There's not one house in that street that's that different. So looked it up, met with the assessor, and there was, in fact, one house, inexplicably, that the value spiked up that had a $2,000 increase compared to the neighbor with the same house. In fact, I think the neighbor's house had a slightly better grade in one of the evaluation areas. Same land, same square footage.
So what was the reason?
There was an error on the field guard, and a 4 looked like a 7, or a 7 looked like a 4.
But that's not what N40 is, because we had the exact same thing in East Rock. What happened in New Haven over 10 years is almost the entire increase of value of property happened in one half of East Rock. So people sometimes had $10,000 tax increases.
The increases
and
are...
the thing is that I don't know what the city could have done. So everybody else had the taxes go down because what the reevaluation does, and one reason they want to do it every 5 and 10 is to stop the shock from it being so dramatic when values change. In reality, values changed. So if in reality values change, what can you do? Now, are you revisiting what N40 is going to be composed as next year when you do your next reval?
I hope that that's a discussion that we have with the new reval company, and we're going to also, look at other reval companies as well coming into the new reval to have.
So you haven't picked one yet?
No, we have
not.
not.
Will it be Vision again?
It could be, but I'm hoping that there's some discussion amongst more than one.
So you're discussing with potential new reval companies.
Correct.
Now, are you allowed to do that in advance?
You can do it up to in 1 year in advance, get it started, or you can wait and ask for a year extension. Towns ask for a year extension in the past.
I meant discussing how they're defining a neighborhood.
Oh, no, you can't get into that with the companies. We're looking at companies to reval.
So how are you going to deal with this N40 issue? Or maybe that's just the breaks because the value went up.
So,
by the way, I have to mention, Curt, because we're going a little bit over because we started late. You're listening to WNHH FM at 103.5 LP FM here, based out of New Haven, Connecticut. We're doing Dateline New Haven with Mayor Curt Leng. So is there anything you could do for people in N40, or is that just the breaks?
Here's the thing. N40, when the values were taken, the sale prices were a lot higher. And you saw the sale prices change. And the sample was also much smaller than I would have hoped it would have been. Mm-hmm. So I think people had really good arguments. I didn't have any way that I could change it. People went to the Board of Assessment Appeals, and some people sought some relief and got it. Many did not. I understand the frustration. I wish I had a better answer. I can say this: Neighborhood 40 was not the only neighborhood in town that saw spikes. There was different pockets throughout town, and there was some north, some south, some east, some west that saw spikes. While, like I said, the majority, 2/3, went down. The new reval, I would suspect, is going to do something different, and there'll be another neighborhood that's going to be very frustrated.
And why do you expect us to have?
That's what's happened over history. Every reval.
And have sales prices changed since then?
Certain areas have gone up, and certain areas have gone down.
What's happening in N40?
I have not seen the levels that were happening 5 years ago, and
so
probably
the spike is over there.
And is it because the taxes are that high? I'm sure it's a factor. Sure.
So that's one thing. So when you're running a city, if people want their values to increase, so they don't want you taxing too much, then if their values go up, they have to pay more taxes compared to other people in town. So will they be happy with you if they don't get another reval spike because they're going to say you taxed us too much and our values went down?
You actually get both. I've had people yell at me that my value went down and now my house is not worth as much, which is is not the case. The value is as much as the market will bear. And I've had people that argue with me that our values went up and now you're taxing us too much.
Because that's what they say, people in East Rock and New Haven, which is that it is hard generally if your taxes go really high.
Sure.
If they've gone up 10,000. So we got to find ways to help you.
Especially in the immediacy. If it's incremental and you're getting little increases over
could be
time.
argued for annual revals based on electronics, factoring in the new sales.
I appreciate that you mentioning that. Our new assessor is looking at a way to do some statistical analysis that would allow for updates annually after the next reval. And I do think that's the most fair way to do it.
So maybe fix the system. But ultimately, if your value's worth more, that's a plus. You can borrow more money. When you sell your house, you're going to get more money. And the downside is you have to pay more taxes, tax based on what stuff's worth. And that's kind of the system, right?
The biggest downfall is that the system's broken, and we should have a better and more progressive taxation system and more diversity of revenue.
But you got to answer my one question I never figured out about revals before we go.
I'll try.
So when you pay taxes, you're paying it on your assessed value. But the assessment is only 70% of the appraised value. So it's only 70% of what your house is worth, but everybody's at 70%.
Right.
So why do we do that?
I assume that it was because of trying to give people a homestead exemption off a part of their value, but I don't know why 70 was picked. Yeah,
but if everyone's getting 70, it's just doing more math rather than just make it all 100.
I couldn't tell you on that one. I would like to see homeowners have a $50,000 homestead exemption if you're a homeowner in a town. I think that'd be really important.
But renters then have bigger rent increases passed along to them?
Slightly. But the larger companies are able to absorb it, and particularly in Hamden with a new 2 ISO rating.
Getting back around to that. So if we're going to go full circle, you're going to be at Sleeping Giant tomorrow.
I am going to be a Sleeping Giant tomorrow.
Bringing lunch or what?
I'm going to see what we do. Perhaps bring the family down or just stop by. But absolutely, I got to see it on opening day. People have been very excited about it.
Well, that's great. Great news in Hamden. Mayor Curt Leng, thanks so much for coming by for Dateline Hamden.
My pleasure. I enjoy our chats.
I really love them. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHH Station Manager Harry Droz. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital, Birch and Moses PC, and Gateway Community College for providing funding for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us day and night at WNHH, Hamden, New Haven's home for community radio.